Welcome back to the Angular 2 masterclass with Alejandro Rangel. In this part, we are going to talk about directive, in particular to the attributes directive. What is a directive first? Well, a directive, it's a concept that came from Angular 1, and the idea behind this is that we can have in our HTML, tags that are custom, and Angular will know how to hook them to certain piece of code. So we know, for example, that in HTML we have a h2, and then we can write something here, subtitle, right? And then the HTML and the browser will know how to render this. But what about if we can have something like Angular HTML DOM? So we can have something like this, and we can put a text here. And normally browsers interpret this as a div, so they replace this as a div internally, and that's it. Okay, but what happens if Angular knows how to deal with this kind of tags and make some kind of code and logic with this, right? At this point you should be wondering, but that's what we have been doing so far with the components, right? That in our Angular apps we put here my app, here too we put my app, right? And then everything was glued to the code of the component and so on. But guess what? Yes, a component is a directive. So a component is just a set of a directive, a type of a directive. But a pure directive, basically, it's HTML, a tag, and then this will be bind to some code in our Angular class. Yes. So let's go back to the slide, and what do we have here? So an attribute directive, it's one specific directive that will modify the style of the HTML. So basically, if we have, for example, a text and we want to highlight this text, so far we don't know how to do it with Angular. We could do it with pure JavaScript, with CSS, but the idea is that in Angular we need a way to provide how to change the appearance of HTML in our code. So this kind of directive, the attributes are only meant to change the style of the element. Very important, because we will have other type of directive that modify the structure of the DOM. In this case, we are not removing elements from the DOM, adding elements from the DOM, just changing the style. Okay, how does it look? Well, this is a built-in attribute directive. This means that this kind of directive comes from Angular 2 itself, so you don't have to write anything for this. Basically, you decide, okay, I want to use it. We use the square brackets. We learned this in the form chapter, and in this case, we are saying we want to change the style of the paragraph with a background of color lime. It's self-explanatory, right? So that's it. But not always we can use all built-in attribute directive. So we have to have the possibility to write our own directive, right? So how do we write a custom directive? Let's imagine that we have a case, we have a div, and we want a directive that is named app highlight. Sorry. And then when you hover this div, we want a color of white smoke for the hover color. And when we click on it, we want it in gray color, right? So to write a custom directive, we do something like this. Import. We need to import the directive, the element ref, and the input. These are the three stuff, the minimum three that we need to write an attribute directive. We import them from Angular 2 core library. Then we have our decorator. We are, as always, we are saying this class, in this case, is a directive. We have a selector. This is going to be the DOM selector for our directive. Notice that in this case, it's different from the component. In this case, we are passing square brackets, as we learned in the form video. Okay, and the name of our directive. The host is a property of our decorator where we combine events like mouse enter, mouse leave, click to event in our class. Okay, so inside our class we will have variables as always. For example, in this case we have a private variable that is named active color. Then we have another decorator. This is new for us. So this decorator is telling this variable we will receive it from outside as an input of our directive. Wait a second. What do you mean with that? Well, if we take a look, let's go back. Yes, we are here. So if you take a look, we are passing some parameters to the directive, saying the hover color and the active color. In order to understand that, we have to tell to our directive that, yes, we are expecting an input with the name hover color and another one that is active color. In this case, we are using the setting function, the setters and getters from TypeScript, so we can call our custom function when we are setting the value. If you don't know what we are talking about, we could mention that briefly, but basically instead of doing this way that TypeScript will create a getter and setter for you, in this case you can do it on your own. Okay, it's not critical, neither important, but I wanted to put an example so you have both options to set the value. The most important is that comes from an input. It comes from outside the directive, these values. Then we have the events. This is the event lister for when we put the mouse enter inside our directive. And also in the constructor, you can take a look that we are injecting the element ref. So this is going to be the DOM element that we attach this directive. In this example, the EL is going to be the div, and we can access through the following el.native element.style.background color. With this, we can get the background color of our div, for example.